Of the Pinstripe Prospects Podcast, episode number 36, of season number 2. And of course, the Yankees on Wednesday was baseball heaven. And for some points, Yankee fans, it didn't feel like heaven against the Indians, but they ended up finding a way to win game 2, 10-9. They are in the ALDS, going out to San Diego. I think they actually started flying to San Diego for game 1 on Monday between the Yankees and the Rays. It should be a fun series. We have a mega podcast for you today. We're going to, of course, recap game 2, what went right, in some cases, what went wrong, and we'll examine the bigger picture while looking at the series win as a whole. We're hoping to be joined by John Vittas, who is the play-by-play voice of the Charlotte Stone Crabs. That's the Rays High A minor league organization. We're going to get into him, preview the Rays, and also take a look at their minor league organization, which is really good. Look at some of the top prospects that they have. We'll give you our X factors. We'll give you keys to the series. We'll talk about the playoffs so far because it's been basically watching a different baseball game every few hours. I think it's been really fun to watch. And, of course, our final thoughts later on. I want to remind you can follow us on Twitter at Pinstripe Pros. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Instagram at Pinstripe Pros. Be sure to like and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. Please give us a rating. We hope you give us a 5-star rating, but we just want to hear from you. What do you like? What do you don't like as we continue to do these podcast episodes as long as the Yankees are in the postseason? You can also email me, rickjkeeler@gmail.com, and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. I'm pleased to be joined, of course, by my 2 co-hosts as always. James O'Connell's back. James, how you doing?
Nice and relaxed after a series win. Unbelievable. I just one of the most stressful games I've ever watched in the postseason. But nice and relaxed after yesterday. Definitely a little stressed out. That was insanity. Just pure insanity.
There was a lot of pacing back and forth. I will say that last night. And it does emotionally drain you a little bit to a regard. And also, the great runner of our social media, Alexis Farinacci, is here. Alexis, how are you?
Doing well. Yeah, echo what James said. Man, that game was stressful last night. Feeling a little tired today from that one, but the Yankees pulled off a great win. I guess you can kind of say great win. It was a great win at the end. To move on to the ALDS, we've got some excitement coming up between the Rays and Yankees next week.
Which, safe to say, Alexis and I were talking before we started recording, it's probably the least bad blood of the 2 American League series remaining. And you wouldn't think that going into today, but with the A's playing the Astros, that's going to be a lot of bad blood involved in that series. And I hope they give the Astros the Dodger clubhouse out in Dodger Stadium. That would be really fun. But we'll get into that later. We're going to dive into many specifics from Wednesday night's 10-9 win for the Yankees. But let's start basically with a general overview of the game. Alexis, I'll start with you. Your major takeaways from game 2.
Oh, my game 2 takeaways. The offense looked really good. Overall, came up clutch when they needed to. Between Gary Sanchez, Brett Gardner, who kind of would have thought that Brett Gardner would get on base and Gary Sanchez would drive him in with a home run. 2 guys that I feel like all season we talk about their struggles, and they kind of come back and do it together. Another great night for Giancarlo Stanton. Gio Urshela, man, what a night for him. So I think those are your highs from the game. And then you take away, bullpen struggled. They've got to figure out what's going on and figure it out quick, because this is a good Rays team that doesn't allow many runs in. So the bullpen's got to be on point after starting pitching.
James, what about you?
Immediate takeaway, just clutch hitting continue to happen. We kind of this team struggled all regular season long. That's no secret. But every time they got punched, they answered. There's a lot of questions about this team, this group specifically being kind of a spineless group. I see that all over Twitter saying they're not resilient. Well, last night they proved to be very resilient. Anytime they got punched in the mouth, they answered right back. 6-4 ball game. All of a sudden, Cleveland ties game 6-6. Gary Sanchez 2-run home run. Same thing. Cleveland takes the lead in the bottom of the 8th. They can come back, score 2 runs, take the lead again. Just overall clutch hitting, and Aaron Boone got bailed out. Let's be real. That was a complete mismanaged baseball game by every stretch of the imagination. He got bailed out. He did. Some questionable bullpen calls, taking Luke Voigt out in the 7th inning of a slugfest, which it was so evident the way that game was going. I don't know how you take out the major league leader in home runs. It was just a very mismanaged baseball game. He's lucky he got away with one right there.
Yeah, we can get into that a little bit later, but it seemed like I think the consensus was Aaron Boone was managing this game like they had to win it, not that they had another game tomorrow. Well, would have had another game tomorrow if they'd lost it, which we'll get into those situations later, but there were plenty he could be second-guessed on. And one, I think, on Thursday, he actually did say he second-guesses himself on, which we'll get into. I want to get, of course, let's start with Gio Urshela. Because we talked about it. There's a different Yankee hero, it seems, every night with this lineup, and Urshela delivered the grand slam in the fourth off the Wild thing. James Karinchak, they worked a great at-bats in that fourth inning. I thought that was also an unsung part of the night for the Yankees. Is we'll remember the home runs hit, but so many great at-bats, especially by Stanton, who I think I'll get into him later. I think he's a big key to the DS the way he's going right now. But you get the grand slam by Urshela in the fourth. You get the double play from his butt in the eighth inning, which arguably saves the game. And then a great job by him on that 0-2 pitch to kind of go down and get it against Hand and get a base hit, which you look at that ninth inning against Hand, the Yankees did it without hitting a home run. But I think it's safe to say James Urshela is the MVP of Game 2, even though there were a lot of worthy candidates.
That was the Gio Urshela revenge game. Nothing short of it. Just the defense, the hitting. I mean, if you're the Cleveland Indians, are you kicking yourself or what? I mean, and no one could predict this guy was going to put together an offensive arsenal like the way he has with the Yankees.
Yeah, and it's like what oh, go ahead. It's like what the Yankees did in AAA with their hitting coach, where it's different things. They find a way to develop their players a little more. And I never bought it as a revenge game for the Yankees, James, for Urshela, because they got him from Toronto. I mean, if anything, the Indians were the ones that didn't keep him and went to the Blue Jays. I didn't really get that whole revenge narrative thing.
Well, it's just his former team. That's really, because let's not forget, Gio Urshela was known for being a Cleveland Indian. Not known. He wasn't really known for anything past before being a Yankee, but Urshela was kind of known to, they traded him away for virtually nothing. The Blue Jays, so I could see why he would have some extra motivation. I could see why it was interpreted as a little revenge game, because that's a team that gave up on him, you know?
Alexis, what did you make of Urshela's night? I know you just talked about it a little bit earlier, but I mean, just look at that ninth inning as a whole. Urshela had the great at bat, but then you had Torres come up big with a base hit in the infield. Gardner didn't get a hit, but he worked a big count to get the strikeout, and then we'll get into Gary Sanchez in a little bit, just his ability to not strike out with base load and actually get a sacrifice fly to tie the ball game.
Yeah, I thought it was an absolute phenomenal night for Gio Urshela. You could tell he was just having an absolute blast out there. Going 2 for 5, but coming up clutch with that grand slam, and then that play, what was it, in like the 7th or 8th inning? Or no, it was in the 9th inning. That absolutely saved the Yankees from potentially losing that game. They were already going to be down a run, and that saved potentially way more. Just thought he looked absolutely phenomenal last night, was having a blast, said in his post-game press conference, that was the best game I ever played in my life. The team always stayed positive, focused. Everybody had the same goal. We made it. This is a kid who kind of had an up and down season this year, and he was feeling it and really kind of wanted to be there for his team. I think that's one thing that you look at Gio Urshela and his personality, and he just wants to help his team out. Really good kid out there, and really came in clutch last night and just looked phenomenal.
James, it was something I wanted to touch on, where you look at Sanchez working the at-bat and the sacrifice fly, but those big innings the Yankees had, a lot of those were drawn by working the count, especially against Carrasco in the 3rd and 4th inning, getting those walks, getting those hits that helped lead to the home runs. It seemed like the Yankees mixed in. They had their fair share of long balls, but I thought Stanton and Sanchez did a great job, especially Stanton, working that 5-pitch walk in the 9th inning. Even when he had those 2-0, 3-1 counts, he didn't expand the zone. That's just a great thing for him going into this next round.
That's been kind of the Yankee formula over the last couple of seasons. Work the count and get on base. That's been the deal. And it just seemed like Giancarlo Stanton kind of bought into that last night. Every time you kind of saw him up, he just seemed so anxious. He's swinging the balls out of the zone. He almost looked like he was guessing. Last night he looked patient. This whole series he's looked patient, even though he didn't look great against Shane Bieber. Granted, it is Shane Bieber, regardless of what happened to him with those 7 runs. He's looked real good to play it. whenever Giancarlo I'm happy to say, whenever Giancarlo Stanton steps up to the plate in the postseason, I'm feeling confident. I never thought I'd get to that point, but I feel confident when he's up to the plate that there's going to be a good at bat put together, and it just seems like he's finally starting to buy in a little bit to Yankee philosophy.
And throughout all the chaos from last night, I mean, with the rain, Wednesday night with the rain delay, Masahiro Tanaka had to give up a run, then had to come back out, even though the rain delay at first was for no rain. Then the rain showed up. It wasn't a great game for Tanaka. You can make the case, and Aaron Boone did on Thursday, that he should have took him out before the start of the bottom of the fifth. I won't say, James, a great start for Tanaka, but when you looked at that first inning, I was ready for Jordan Montgomery to come in after the first. I was shocked Tanaka stayed in. I think it's a great game, but I also think it's a game at least that defines Tanaka as just grinding out games and keeping you within striking distance.
It was a resilient performance. It was. He got again another guy. It was just the theme of the whole game. They got punched in the mouth and they got back up. And not for nothing, you want to talk about getting dealt a bad hand. I was screaming last night with that rain delay. Masahiro Tanaka walks out in a monsoon and it looked like the hurricane, and they waited until the Indians scored a run to take him off the field instead of just doing it right away. Like what was that? I was livid, and every Yankee fan should have been livid, had every right to be livid. That was insanity. It was a literal hurricane outside. How do you put the guy out on the mound and then wait? Oh no, Cleveland scored a run now. Okay, now let's take him off the field. That should not work that way. That was complete BS. That was garbage. And Tanaka put together not a very good performance, but he kept them in the game. He did. After giving all those 4 runs, that was a very tough start, obviously pitching in the rain and then coming back from the delay. All things considered, an effective start for Tanaka, and just really exactly kind of what they needed in that type of game to just keep him in it, keep it at 4, and just let it rock.
Yeah, I mean, echoing James too. You have to wonder why Major League Baseball gave the okay to start that game. If you knew that sell was coming, why start? Why kind of burn the pitchers there? I mean, if you're Tanaka, if you're Boone, you have to be frustrated. I mean, you go out there, then you kind of ice him, and he's got to sit for a while and then come back up. And it wasn't really that long of a delay, no, but same token, that takes a toll on a pitcher. So definitely resilient on Tanaka's part to be able to kind of keep his composure, come back out there and pitch a decent 4 innings. But yeah, I mean, granted they're not in Florida, but in the Florida State League, if we know a sell's coming, we're going to hold off on starting that game until that sell passes, even if it's sunshine 5 minutes before the game. You got to take care of the players, and I don't think Major League Baseball did a great job with that yesterday.
And they didn't really do a good – no, I won't say – I mean, they didn't do a good job on Wednesday. You could also look at Thursday where baseball looked at a sell in Chicago and said we're just postponing the Marlins-Cubs game 2 till Friday, where you have that luxury in your back pocket. I mean, yes, the rain isn't as bad as, let's say, that caused you to postpone a game, but you have to look at least going forward into when that sell is actually going to pass before you even think about starting that game amidst the fall frenzy of playoff games on your screen. You have to keep that in mind. So I think they missed the boat there. And while it affected Tanaka immediately, it actually affected Carrasco, I think, later on, because it was 2 pitchers that really rely on their off speed, and Tanaka had really no feel for it. And I think by the 3rd, 4th inning, which if you listen to the Game 1 podcast, somebody here called the 4th inning, I think. But Carrasco really lost feel of his off speed, and I thought Alomar did the right thing going to Karinchak. You saw last night the Indians have good young pitchers, but when you make your playoff debut, you tend to get a little bit of nerves, and both Karinchak and McKenzie got those. So I want to remind you, of course, at Pinstripe Prospects, we provide exclusive content to our paid subscribers with our Dugout membership program. You get scouting reports, player features, and much more in addition to our free Major League postseason coverage. You can sign up for either $5.50 a month or $40 a year. And if you're not sure about us, you can try us for free. Just use the promo code #WelcomeBackBaseball. Again, it's promo code. Use the hashtag #WelcomeBackBaseball and get your first 30 days free. So give us a shot. If you're not sure, I think you won't regret giving us a try for 30 minutes. So we'll take a quick break. We'll come back for our conversation with John Curtis, the voice of the Charlotte Stone Crabs, right after this.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Pinstripe Prospects podcast. We are pleased to be joined now by my good friend John Vittas, the play-by-play broadcaster for the Charlotte Stonecrabs, as we preview the series upcoming between the Rays and the Yankees, ALDS 2020. John has spent 5 years in professional baseball, the last 4 of which came in the Tampa Bay Rays organization, as the play-by-play voice of the Charlotte Stonecrabs, which is the single-A advanced affiliate of the Tampa Bay Rays. He's broadcasted several of the Rays and Yankees current players while touring the Florida State League. He graduated from the University of Maryland in 2015, where he studied sports journalism. Some of the players he has broadcasted on in the Florida State League include Brandon Lowe, Nate Lowe, Josh Fleming, Mike Brazo, Randy Arizona, Shane McClanahan, the up-and-coming prospect for the Rays, who got to join the Rays in the Wild Card Series this year. Jonathan Loizaga, Nick Nelson, fan favorite of the Yankees, Clark Schmidt, Tyro Estrada, Gleyber Torres as well. So we are very pleased to be welcomed by John tonight. John, how you doing?
Doing great, guys. Appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. From there, I will turn it over to Ricky.
So, John, I just want to first off get your initial thoughts on this series. A lot of bad blood between these two teams from the last match from Yankee Stadium. So before we dive into specifics on this series, give me a quick overview of what's your thoughts going into Rays-Yankees in a neutral field at Petco Park.
Well, both these teams are playing their best baseball right now, which, of course, is the goal. So I think no matter how the matchups end up unfolding, this is going to be the best division series of the 4. I'd be surprised if it doesn't go 5 games. Obviously, the emotions are going to play a large role. I'm sure we'll get into that. But just the way the teams match up, I mean, I think both these teams have even better back half of the rosters than a lot of folks that are casual fans realize. I think players 15 through 25 on the Yankees and the Rays roster might be better than 15 through 25 on any other roster in baseball. So it's a lot more intriguing in a 5-game series than the 3-game series, because I think you're going to see a lot of different names play a large role.
Yeah, I think arguably you look at, to me, this is the ALCS in my mind. I mean, no disrespect to the Astros and the A's, but these are I think the 2 best teams in the American League right now. But if you go with a 5-game series, if you think it's going 5, I would right now think, and I'm not going to make a pick on this, you would think the Yankees have the advantage with Garrett Cole going twice, but you could also make the case, and it's one of the things I look at, John, with the Rays. I use the word weird with them because you can't outmanage Kevin Cash if you're Aaron Boone, because Kevin Cash just has a weird way of managing where you bring in guys, and you've covered a lot of them, where they're not household names, but they're versatile. Like, they just keep finding ways to get it done, and I think they take a guy, they find a great pitch, and it works for them. Like, you have guys like Nick Anderson and John Curtis and different relief pitchers that just seem to come out of nowhere and excel in this organization. And I think while the Yankees don't have that versatility, and the Rays have it both in the bullpen and in their lineup.
Yeah, both these organizations are very progressive. And for the last 4 years, I've been lucky enough to kind of get an inside look at both of them, obviously a little bit closer with the Rays. But, I mean, we've played the Yankees affiliate in Tampa, at least 4 series a year. So I've gotten a chance to talk to a lot of folks on the inside of both organizations. And they both give each other a lot of credit on the inside for being a top 5 or so organization in terms of technology and investing in their player development chain. Obviously, the Yankees have that top-end talent that they can afford, so they end up shipping off some of their prospects. Obviously, some of them have played a large role on the roster in the major leagues this year, but they both get it. They're both not stubborn. They're both willing to conform to technology in baseball and all the different analytics moving forward as things go on. So they're both on the cutting edge. They both have a really good player development chains in terms of the types of coaches they hire, the types of philosophy they implement with their players. So it's no surprise to me to see them in what we would call the Elite Eight of MLB right now.
Alexis, what do you got?
Yeah, I think this is going to be a great series between the two organizations. Absolutely. I think it's going to be a pitching duel. I think the Rays are really good at holding their opposing teams down on runs. And we talked about that earlier, about how the Yankees are going to need to come out swinging if they want to get through the Rays, because the Rays are really good at holding down runs. And Garrett Cole going game one for the Yankees, we have to assume it's going to be a pitching duel, and it's going to be a fun one to watch for sure.
Yeah, you assume Snell and Cole will both get 2 starts, whether it's 1 in 5, have to be 1 in 5, I suppose. But I think they would go on short rest either way, especially if Blake doesn't get beyond 90 pitches or so in that game 1. So yeah, the innings, we're going to see a lot of high velocity. I think it's going to come down to timely hitting in the end. I know it's an easy answer, but I think all the games are going to be close. I think they're going to be decided by just a couple of swings. And I would expect it to be fairly low scoring because of the types of power arms that the teams offer. It's going to be very difficult to string together 4, 5, or 6 hits in an inning. So expect close, tight games, and whoever gets that big hit late in the ball game might decide each game each night.
Yeah, one of the weird things with the Tampa Bay Rays, I was looking, John, at in terms of the splits against the Yankees. They had 16 home runs against them in the 10 games, but only hit 221. And going into a pitcher-friendly ballpark, like you said, both these teams, it seems, if you look at the matchups, rely on the long ball. But I was surprised looking at that batting average with the way that these guys kind of have the versatility of contact and power was that low.
Yeah, the Yankees are a classic, home run hitting team, and they've been that way for a long time. And they've got guys with varying skill sets where they have some table setter types, but for the most part, all those guys can hit the ball out of the yard. If you guys have ever been to Southern California in the evening, any time of the year, the ball does not carry at all. So I would expect the team that puts the ball in play a little bit more might have an advantage. The Rays definitely have some guys like Hunter Renfroe who are all or nothing, but they also do have some contact guys. Joey Wendell's probably, his swing will play well in that ballpark. And that's a factor that people probably aren't talking about. Everyone's talking about the headhunting and the bad blood during the regular season, but they're playing this game at Petco Park. So it's not at Yankee Stadium. It's not at the Trop, because both those stadiums have their advantages for both teams. And there's no crowd, of course. So it's going to be very interesting to get each other on kind of a neutral surface, and in a park where the ball doesn't carry well. It's not easy to square up balls against, Glasnow, Snell, and Morton, but it's going to be even tougher to get the ball out in that ballpark. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays. The Rays, I think, have a few more guys that are line drive types of hitters. Again, Joey Wendell's the perfect example. But those outfielders, Margot or Rosarena, they're contact line drive types of guys. And those are the types of swings that work at Petco Park. So it'll be interesting to see what type of a role the stadium and the environment play in the series as well.
I think, too, you look at Giancarlo Stanton on the Yankees side. Has been known to do well at Petco Park. Has already hit 8 home runs out of that park, not including the World Baseball Classic. So I think he's going to be one to watch, too. And whoever can either drive the ball out or, like you said, make that contact and really get the ball in play.
And there's so much familiarity with both teams, too, because they've played each other 10 times in the past 2 months. So there's not going to be many surprises. Snell, Glasnow, Morton, and the same thing with the Yankee starters. Their off-speed stuff's going to have to be sharp. They're going to have to get it over for strikes because, we know Judge and Stanton can punish fastballs. A lot of guys can. So I think you might see more pitching backwards than usual. You might see more off-speed than they already used in the first 10 meetings. So it's going to be a cat and mouse game because these teams are so familiar with each other and they've played so much already this year. We're in the wild card series. You're seeing a lot of teams not playing division opponents where it's the first time they're looking at each other. So the familiarity is something that we haven't seen much yet in the postseason.
It's from the Yankee perspective, you got to worry about Glasnow. 3 starts against the Yankees this season, 1-1 with a 3.77 ERA, about 22 strikeouts in those 3 games. Snell didn't have many strikeouts, yet he has that confidence you tend to worry about because he loves beating the Yankees. And the Yankees seem to hit Charlie Morton pretty well. I think that's going to be a huge thing in this series. John, we saw the Rays blow out the Blue Jays in the wild card series, close win in game 1, but a blowout win in game 2. I thought Montoyo tried to be like a little too cute, matching the Rays' weirdness by saving their ace for game 2. But what'd you take away from the Rays' mini sweep of Toronto?
Yeah, I didn't mind waiting on Hyun-Jin Ryu. I thought the Blue Jays would give the Rays a little bit tougher of a task. Like you said, game 1 was very competitive. But as a person in the Rays corner, I kind of expected it to be a 3-game close series because the Blue Jays have a lot of talent. They do have some really good power arms in that bullpen, but they never really got the chance to use that with the lead because the Rays were able to get out in front in both games. But again, I definitely thought it would be closer. The Rays looked really polished. I was really pleased to see the offense from Margot and Arozarena, a couple of newcomers, really young players. You don't know how they're going to react in the postseason, whereas all the other Rays position players pretty much were there last year and had that experience against the Astros where they really went toe-to-toe with them for 5 games. So it was nice to see those newcomers contribute with guys like Austin Meadows still on the mend. And of course, getting Choi and Diaz back helped as well. So it seemed like the Rays were firing on all cylinders in those 2 games. But then again, so were the Yankees, handling a really good Cleveland team with the best pitching in baseball.
Yeah, and I think we talked about the Yankees being able to fire on all cylinders. I mean, you look at last night's game. We talked about it earlier on the first segment of the podcast. The Yankees can come up clutch when they need to. And the Rays can do that as well. It's definitely going to be a battle of the bats and battle of the pitching. I think Garrett Cole, who we know has kind of become that home run pitcher, he's going to have to be on with his off-speed pitches. Both these teams are firing on all cylinders. I think it's going to be nothing but excitement to watch in this ALDS upcoming next week.
So, John, what do we look for with this Rays bullpen? We saw kind of the weaknesses with the Yankee bullpen in Game 2 against Cleveland. The Rays, they'll throw anybody in any situation. I think that's the fun part about them. You'll never know who's coming in the 6th, 7th, 8th inning, 9th inning, and even in a lot of cases. How do you expect Kevin Cash to manage this bullpen in this series where you have to play potentially 5 games in 5 days?
Well, they definitely have the arms to get through 5 games in 5 days. I think the mentality is a little different than it was last year, where everybody was healthy and ready to go and experienced. This year, it's a little bit more of a crapshoot just because the names they have in there right now are not the reliable names that they've had in years past. They have Nick Anderson and Diego Castillo at the top of the pecking order. Like you said, there's no true closer. I think they set a record this year in the majors with 13 different guys recording a save over the course of a 60-game season, which just shows you how much depth they have in the bullpen. They lost a lot of key pieces this year on that pitching staff. Fortunately, their 3 big starters are healthy. So I think Kevin Cash's mentality going into the series is to use that bullpen as little as possible. And that's never been the Rays' mentality before. They are more than happy to dip into the bullpen early in the ballgame because they have several arms they can trust. But in this series, even though some of those relief arms are still really high-powered, some of them put up really good numbers this year. I don't know if they trust them quite as much because guys like Aaron Loop and Ryan Thompson are guys that are new to the organization or at least new to the Major League club. So I think they're going to ride Snell, Glasnow in a little bit more than you'd expect going into the series, especially first time through. Obviously, if Snell comes back for a Game 5, he's going to have a shorter leash because he's on 3 days rest and it's a do-or-die game. But Game 1, Game 2, and Game 3, I would not be surprised to see all 3 of those starters go at least 6 innings.
And John, you talk about guys that the Rays have on their roster right now. We saw Shane McClanahan, local Southwest Florida native, join the Rays for the wild card series. Do you think he plays a role in this ALDS? And if so, what role does he play?
He's going to be the fireman that comes in middle innings in a big spot because he's got such a plus fastball. I mean, it borders on 100 miles an hour. It's got a lot of life and carry, and he's got that attitude where he's not going to be afraid of anybody. So he's going to be raring to go. My only concern with him is that he's too excited. He's got too much adrenaline because I've seen him come out into some games and miss up in the zone with the fastball. And even though it's 98, he gets away with it a lot, but it is pretty straight. So if the Yankees hitters are sitting on a fastball up in the zone and they get 98, they probably will still be able to handle it. But I think in a 5-game series, I mean, if he's on the roster, you're definitely going to see him. Rays are going to use all their pitchers, even if it's only a 3 or 4 game series. So I'm interested to see if he makes the roster again for this round, because I think they'll add Josh Fleming for a potential Game 4 start, or maybe see Ryan Yarbrough play a larger role because obviously he didn't get in the wild card series. So if McClanahan's on the roster, you're going to see him, and I think you're going to see him in a high leverage situation.
So, John, let's talk a little bit about the Rays farm system for a little bit before we get your pick on the series. Obviously, this farm system is regarded as probably the best in baseball, if not top 2 or 3 in baseball. You've seen a lot of these players up close. In a quick synopsis, how would you define this Rays farm system going into hopefully an actual minor league baseball season next year?
It's so deep. I've had the luxury of watching such good teams the last couple of years. Where everybody on our roster not only contributes, but actually has a potential major league future. There's some organizations that win because they draft that polished college talent that'll win at the A-ball level, but the Rays have high-end prospects and guys with major league potential. They're younger than the average organization, but they actually have a lot more talent than most organizations. So I saw last year in Port Charlotte, our pitching staff, for more than half a season, I think it was something like 90 games, the rotation had an ERA of 1.4, which is just ridiculous. So we had the best record in the league, and there's no doubt a lot of that pitching talent is going to end up in AA, AAA, or the majors in the next couple of years. So the Rays have an embarrassment of riches in the minor leagues, a testament to their scouting, their coaching, their development, and they have plenty of depth with the hitting too. Wander Franco's coming, and he's going to be an absolute star. I saw him for more than half the season last year. And I saw Gleyber Torres too when he was a teenager. Those guys are absolute studs. So it's been fun to watch those two guys in particular, but all the guys the Rays have, they have a lot of really promising talent coming.
And
you mentioned Wander Franco, John. You mentioned Wander Franco, John. And we saw Alex Kirilloff, who we both got to see in the Twins organization. We saw him make his MLB debut in the ALDS or in the Wild Card Series. Do you think Wander Franco makes a debut in this ALDS?
I think the only way Wander gets into a postseason game is if Willy Adames gets hurt. That's the only way, because they've got plenty of coverage between Wendell, Yandy Diaz, Brandon Lau, and some of the other guys in that infield that can play multiple positions. So I don't think they're going to start his service clock if they don't have to. Because obviously he would lose a year of control if they call him up before the end of April next year. So if Willie gets hurt, though, I don't think they can live with Joey Wendell playing shortstop every single game in the postseason. So then I think you do see him. But whenever he gets to the major leagues, and again, I don't think it's going to be this postseason, you're going to want to watch. He's exciting. He's very expressive. He's probably going to rub some people the wrong way, but the majority of people are going to love him because he's got that Fernando Tatis Jr. type of swagger, that Francisco Lindor type of smile. So he's going to be a captivating figure once he gets there. And it was very similar with Gleyber. I had him for all of 2016. Wander's a lot more consistent, but they both had that high-end talent and that good attitude that's going to lend itself well to a long major league career.
Well, John, from your time calling the games for Charlotte going back to last season, give me a player that maybe people don't have a high spotlight on that you think will shine in this organization in 2021.
Yeah, I love that question. That's my favorite part of the minors because everyone sees the prospect list, but there's always a few other guys that become your guys over the course of 140 games. David Bodie was my guy back in 2016, and he's carved out a nice career. Jake Cronenworth would have been my guy in 2017, and he's with the Padres now. This guy got some fanfare, but I'll start with Joe Ryan. He was on our team last year. Became our ace for the majority of the season. We had him and McClanahan for the middle 3 months of the season, and those two were absolutely lights out. It's a mid-90s fastball. It's a bulldog mentality, and he gets a lot of swing and miss. So Joe Ryan would be my number one name. But there's so many good starting pitchers. The other couple to keep an eye on would be Michael Plasmeyer, who's a pitchability lefty. It's soft stuff, but it's still really good. He gets a lot of weak contact. And then the other one who won the league pitcher of the year is Tommy Romero, who's a starting pitcher at an ERA in the ones. And the Yankees had some guys that are kind of similar. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Miguel Yajuri, who I think made his debut this year with the Yankees. Same type of pitch mix for Tommy Romero. So those are some names to keep an eye on.
I'll look at one more for you on the hitting side. It's been a rough time for Garrett Whitley, first-round pick in 2015. I know he was a little bit older for the high A league, but he had almost a 20 home run, 20 stolen base season, 16 and 16 actually. Got hit in the face in spring training before everything got shut down. Of course, this is a guy with a raised draft so well. What did you make of Whitley, and do you think he can live up to that potential as a first-round pick?
He can. The talent's still there for sure for Garrett. He's one of the most positive people you'll ever be around. So I see it in the minor leagues. Attitude is everything because it can get real tough over a 140-game grind when no one's really watching. But Garrett has the best attitude you could possibly have. There's still way too much swing and miss to his game. He was waving at a lot of subpar pitching, but the power is undeniable. The speed is undeniable. The glove is really good. And like I said, the attitude is really good. So I'm not going to write him off by any means. He definitely can still be a major league outfielder. And the other guy, too, to answer your last question, but I kind of tie him in with Whitley because they're very similar, is Moises Gomez. So he's in the top 15 in the race prospect list. But him and Whitley's tools are extremely similar. Both have a ton of power. Both are still really good athletes despite being pretty thick, strong guys. So those are two guys to definitely keep an eye on as well.
So, John, you see the Tampa Tarpons a few times calling the games they play against Charlotte. I want to get insight from you from covering them from the other side. Who are some of the prospects on Tampa you saw last season that you think can make an impact at the big league level for the Yankees down the road?
Great question. I definitely remember a couple of really good Clark Schmidt starts. I wasn't fully sold on him the first time around, but after the second time around, I definitely was. So I think he can be a major league starter. Last year's team was a little light on prospects. The years before that were a lot richer. I would say the one guy who I fell in love with the Tarpons would be Nick Nelson. I saw him multiple times a couple years back, and I thought he was an absolute stud. Same thing goes for Jonathan Loaisiga. Loaisiga and Nelson, I believe, were on the team together in 2018. I mean, those are the types of arms that made you kind of jump out of your seat a little bit. I'm looking at the stats from that team last year. The other name that doesn't get a lot of publicity that I think has a chance to be impact is Dermis Garcia. Big power. I mean, like top of the scale power. With not as much swing and miss as the numbers indicate. He had 105 strikeouts in 75 games last year, but he can really swing the bat, and it is light tower power. So that's definitely the position player to keep an eye on. I don't see any other names here that jump out to me. On the pitching side, Frank Herman is pretty good stuff. Yahuri, who I already mentioned, definitely had the pitchability to be a big leaguer. And the Yankees always have some really good power arms in the bullpen that have a chance. Oh, the one guy I'm missing, probably the guy who I should have led with, is Alexander Biscuino. I saw him at the end of the season, and that's electric stuff. It reminds me of Loaisiga and Nelson, that mid to upper 90s fastball that is, even if it hits a bat, it's going to be pounded into the ground. So I guess Vizcaíno would probably be the biggest name to remember from last year's Tarpons team. And then the second one would be Dermis Garcia.
If Dermis can actually balance out that whole home run strikeout thing, and this is a guy who was a Florida State League All-Star before getting injured and kind of derailing his 2019 campaign. But I agree with you on German. I saw him in Staten Island covering the Staten Yankees when he got drafted. And this is a guy that has just a knack for finding the strike zone. And really, he actually, I think, skipped Charleston to go up to Tampa. So this is a pitcher that the Yankees really value high enough to skip a level entirely. So he's kind of that guy I think nobody really talks about and is going to get at least some buzz, hopefully next year when he gets to the upper levels and maybe gets more notoriety.
Yeah, you're spot on with him because the numbers won't jump out at you. ERA in the upper threes, they're okay. WHIP is 1.38 for last year. But you're right, he does fill up the strike zone, and he does throw pretty hard. He's got some nice run. He's just one of those guys that seems to get hit a little bit harder than he should for some reason. So maybe if the organization can get him one more reliable off-speed pitch, that changes. Maybe they get off the fastball a little bit, and he can become really good. I think he's got some endurance. He can get deep into games. So Frank Herman's kind of a sleeper pick. That's a good call.
Yeah, and you mentioned Loaisiga and Yahuri, who have both had impacts on the Yankees roster this year. What have you seen out of them, John, this season so far? What stood out to you about their performances so far this season?
At the big league level, I've only seen them a couple of times. To me, and this goes back to when I saw Loaisiga in the minors, it's just such an electric fastball. And when he's on, he can locate it really well on the edge of the strike zone. So you might get one loud out or one home run here and there, but when Loaisiga is on with his command, and the same thing goes for Nelson and those other guys that throw hard. If they can command the fastball, they can really bully hitters. So that's what it comes down to at the end of the day. But I remember with Loaisiga, because I believe they added him to the 40-man kind of out of nowhere when he was with Staten Island. And people were kind of wondering why the Yankees would use a coveted 40-man spot on a guy who you wouldn't think would get picked in the Rule 5 draft. But then when he came to the Tarpons that next year, I knew exactly why they protected him. Because it was impressive. And he came out of nowhere, barely had any minor league innings, and was just flat out dominant against our lineup. The Stone Crabs, we've always had a ton of left-handed hitting and the type of hitting that enjoys hitting high velocity, and they couldn't touch Loaisiga. So I definitely think he still has a lot of room to grow and become a starter. When the Yankees veteran starters get a little bit older and retire or end up moving on to other teams, I think the Yankees probably should try and find a spot for Loaisiga to slide into that rotation.
Yeah, absolutely. So going back to the ALDS to kind of wrap things up, John, who is your pick to win the series? And who is the X factor in this series? Who do you think is really going to make an impact, the biggest impact in this series? And the team that you picked to win it, what's the score there? The kind of who wins the series and how many games?
Definitely 5 games. I think if we're being fair, you could probably flip a coin, and you might be right. I'm going to go with my Rays. I have to. They're the number 1 seed. They obviously handled the Yankees in the regular season. Honestly, X factor, it's not that big of a surprise, but I'm going to say Nick Anderson because I think there's going to be a lot of close games, and I think he's going to be lights out. He's proven that he can handle the spotlight in the big situation. He's gotten the Yankees out before. And in those close, tight games, it's going to be up to who can hold the lead, and oftentimes it's going to be a 1-run lead. I think Chapman's been a little shakier this year. It sounds crazy to say to the average fan because Chapman's such a bigger name, but the Rays are going to use Anderson in the biggest spot in every game, and I think he's going to come through every time. So if he doesn't, the Yankees probably win the series. So that's going to be my X factor. I'll say Rays in 5.
Ricky, what's your pick?
See, this is a tough one. My X factor, I think, on the Rays side, I'm going to go with Trevor Richards because I think this is a guy that they're going to use in multiple different roles. We've seen Richards used as an opener this year. And it just seems like even though his numbers might be a little bit high, he tends to shut down Yankee bats. We saw it a couple of times this season, actually throwing the second most innings on the Rays against the Yankees besides Glasnow. So Cash, I think, must be confident in going to him in that role. I'm going to go with the Rays. I'm going to think the Rays win this in 4. And the reason I'm thinking that is just because the bullpen is a lot deeper on the Rays side than it is the Yankee side. I mean, right now, Zach Britton's a guy that has to find the feel for his off-speed. Chad Green, you saw in Game 2, when the off-speed's not working, he has to go to one pitch. That'll work against a Cleveland offense. That's not going to work against a Tampa Bay offense. And you're going to see more of the Yankee bullpen in a 5-game series than a 3-game series. So while the Yankee starters might do okay, I think ultimately it comes down to the pen. And in these late games, as resilient as the Yankees were in Cleveland, the Rays, I think, are just a top notch. There's a reason why they beat them 8 out of 10 this year. I think they're in their head a little bit. You saw it when Jordan Montgomery got rocked, and the Rays kind of sold the Yankees' soul a little bit. I think they're the team that that's not afraid to stand up to them. So give me Tampa in a 4.
All right. So I think I got to be the one who goes Yankees. I mean, I know it's hopeful. The Yankees have not done well against the Rays this season. We've all seen it. But I think they're on fire after this wild card series. Or at least I hope they can keep that fire. I think I'm agreeing with John. I think it's going to be a 5-game series. I think it's going to go deep. I think it's going to be exciting. I think your X factor for the Yankees is going to be Garrett Cole. I think especially if it comes down to a 5-game series, we see Garrett Cole more than once in this series. Between him and then Chad Green, I think he's going to play a big, important role. I think he's been kind of Aaron Boone's go-to this season. And then the bats of Voit and Judge, Stanton, and then Urshela, because I think he's firing up right now. So ultimately, I think it's going to be the Yankees in 5 because I got to stick with my Yankees. But I think it's going to be a really, really exciting series to watch starting Monday. So
I agree. If it goes 5, that's where I think the Rays have to worry slightly. Even though it is Cole on 3 days rest, I don't know if the Rays would go Snell on 3 days rest in that scenario. I think they would have, or whoever goes in game one, whoever Cash decides. But I think the Yankees, if it goes 5, it's to their advantage. But I think what you have to look for, especially on the Yankees side, can Happ and Garcia probably in a game 4 give them the length they need, and it could come down to Tanaka in game 2 as well. You know you're going to get length from Cole, but the Yankees need length from their starters more than the Rays need length, because Tampa can just mix and match different arms, and they don't have 2 or 3 guys they solely depend upon, as opposed to what the Yankees depend upon right now. So Ottavino might be another X factor too, if the Yankees actually use him.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think we have an exciting series upcoming to watch. We want to thank John Vittas for being here with us tonight. John, thank you for joining us tonight. We've enjoyed it. It's going to be a fun series to watch.
Absolutely. I appreciate you guys having me anytime.
And a special thanks to John Vittas from the Charlotte Stone Crabs for hopping on the show. And Alexis Farinacci is back with me for part 2 of the podcast. Alexis, what did you take away from our conversation with John as we head into the ALDS?
I think what we take away from that conversation, which, again, thank you, John, for hopping on. I've known John quite a while now, both coworkers in the Florida State League, John with the Charlotte Stone Crabs, myself with the Tampa Tarpons, and then I was also with the Fort Myers Miracle, now Fort Myers Mighty Muscles. So got to work with him a while and go to Charlotte and broadcast there, and he would come over to Fort Myers. So really good guy. Thanks, John, for joining us. But I think you take away that it's going to be a pitching duel. I think he said it. The Rays can go deep into that bullpen, and I think that's the advantage that they have over the Yankees. You know, we talked about the Yankees needing to figure out the Rays pitching if they want to have any hopes at winning this series. They've got to put the bat on the ball. And we talked about how Petco Park, the ball doesn't necessarily drive there. So these home run hitters are going to have to put some extra oomph on the swing or figure out how to just play that small ball and just get the ball into play. If the Yankees want to have hopes. I think we talked about the fact that it's going to be an exciting series. We all agreed that it's going to go 4 or 5 games. It's going to go deep. It's going to use a lot of pitchers. But it's going to be a good series to watch.
One of the things we didn't really get to chime in on part 1, and that we kind of got into toward the end of that interview with John, I kind of want to get into now, is kind of the bullpen. We talked about it a few weeks ago, is wondering was the Yankees bullpen becoming a problem? And I thought toward the end of September, this bullpen kind of figured it out in a sense. And then you watched Wednesday night, and it just seemed like what could go wrong was going to go wrong. Chad Green lost any ability to throw his off-speed pitches, mainly was throwing his fastball. Zach Britton, who hadn't pitched in a while, didn't really have a good feel of the sinker, wasn't throwing any first pitch strikes, really getting behind every count. Loizaga, of course, gives up the hit to Lupla after Sandy Alomar basically gives them a gift and takes Josh Naylor out of the game. Chapman's got to get 6 outs, which you rarely ever want to ask him to do. And it just seemed like, Alexis, right now, as I said at the end of the interview with John, the Rays kind of seem to have the edge in the bullpen going in because they can kind of mix and match. And Aaron Boone right now just seems to have 4 guys in that circle of trust, and how much can you really use those guys playing potentially 5 games in 5 days before the other team just gets used to seeing them?
Yeah, and I think we've talked about it. The Rays have had the Yankees number all season, and for the Yankees, they're not going to be able to go to their spotlight guys into the bullpen 5 days in a row. I think Garrett Cole goes game 1. I think if we see a game 5, Garrett goes on 3 days rest, or a short day's rest at least. Cause I think we see him come back to be that X factor for the Yankees, that big arm that if the Yankees get in a hole late, do we see Garrett Cole early as well? Do we see him mid-series? I think this is where Aaron Boone really has an interesting job at managing this Yankees starting rotation as well as bullpen going into this series.
Yeah, I think really one of the things is the Rays kind of look to, in a sense, they can go to any guy they want. Now, they can't go to going off the interview, Trevor Richards probably won't be an option for them in the DS, but they have Nick Anderson, they have Diego Castillo, they have John Curtis. It just seems like they can one night throw a guy in the 6th inning and then one time throw a guy in the 8th, 9th inning. I think that's where Cash is one of those things where you could create different matchups, and I think you love what the Rays could do, and I think also it hurts the Yankees. If you go back to one of those series in the Bronx, I can't remember the game, but it seemed like every time the Yankees made a change, I think it was Ottavino and Avilan in the game, the Rays would just counteract with basically putting in the other platoon guy in the ball game. So you're going to see as Boone makes moves, Cash makes moves, and there's that chess game that I think is going to be interesting to watch, because right now I think between Kevin Cash and Aaron Boone, I'm going to tend to side with Kevin Cash.
Yeah, I think we talked about it. The Rays have that deeper bullpen that they can use in this series. I think we are going to see that chess match of who's going to put who in when, and how deep are guys going to go, and when do we switch over to the bullpen. It's going to be interesting to watch for sure.
So going back to Game 2 of the Wild Card Series real quick before we go into the LDS a little more. Looking at Aaron Boone's decisions, I mentioned in part 1 that Tanaka coming out to start the 5th. Boone kind of second guesses himself now for that. What did you make of his decisions after that? Going to Green when I thought Ramirez had great numbers against Green. I think it was like 4 for 7 going in. Zach Britton in the 6th before using a guy like Montgomery. He had warmed up during the game, or Loaizaga going him early in that spot. What'd you make of that, Boone's decisions?
I thought it was an interesting decision for Boone. I don't think you should have brought Loaizaga in that early. But at the same token, Tanaka was starting to struggle just a little bit. I thought he had settled in well. But I think you bring Montgomery in that situation. I think he's a guy who could have given you a little bit more length than Loaizaga was able to go. And I think you saw after Loaizaga, we just kind of had to keep going, and Britton struggled, and interesting call on the bullpen decisions for sure.
I think it also leads to this question. When Boone kind of answered a post-game after Game 2, when do we see Adam Ottavino, if at all? Because if the Yankees aren't using Adam Ottavino and they're warming up Jordan Montgomery, who I think is actually going to play a big role in this American League Divisional Series, because I think as a left-hander he could maybe come in and get a couple of guys out. But what does it say when they're warming Montgomery up 3 times before they even think of warming up Ottavino at all?
Yeah, I definitely thought that was interesting. We saw Montgomery up, then Montgomery was down. Makes you wonder if they're trying to, save him, or what they're trying to do with Ottavino. I thought he was going to kind of be that 8th inning guy or that 7th inning guy, 7th inning and then go to Britton in the 8th and Chappie in the 9th. But Chapman came in early. I think Boone was making a statement there and trying to bring his closer in. But, I think Chapman kind of came into a difficult situation, and broadcaster said it, no closer wants to be brought in that situation. And Chappie struggled a little bit early, but I thought settled in well there in that 9th inning.
So one of the things you also look at is the importance of the rotation. We kind of addressed this earlier, and Aaron Boone even mentioned it last night. I think Joel Sherman asked him, or was it Sherman or Andy Martino in the postgame, asked him, would you see Davey Garcia in a late inning fireman role kind of thing, kind of like we talked about with John McClanahan. And Boone said, no, I need Garcia in this rotation. And I think that's what leads to the importance of this rotation, because if this series gets to be 2-1 going to a Game 4, Aaron Boone's going to give the ball to Davey Garcia, because I don't think he's going to have any other option. So it leads to the importance of this rotation, where I think right now the Rays are more reliant. They're more likely going to get 5 or 6 innings at least out of Snell, Glasnow, and even Morton, even though the Yankees hit Charlie Morton pretty well. I don't think, even though as solid as Tanaka is in the playoffs and as veteran dependency as Happ is, you're also going to have Happ pitching on extended rest, which he has not done well this year, as we have well documented throughout the year. That's where I think this could hurt the Yankees bullpen, because the Rays, at least, you kind of know, unless they get rocked early, which the Yankees are going to have to do, they're more likely to go deep in the game than the Yankees starters are outside of Garrett Cole. Tanaka can, but we haven't really seen him go deep in the games this year to begin with, because his season started so late.
Yeah, the starters are definitely going to be on a tight leash for the Yankees. They're going to have to do well, but in the same token, we need them to go deep. We need them to give us some length if we want to have any success with the bullpen. I don't think our bullpen's really built to be able to keep the game going for length. I think the starters need to do well. I think we're definitely going to see that length out of Cole. We need to see that length out of Tanaka. and then all the other starters that we see down the line.
How much stock do you take into the Rays winning 8 of 10 from the Yankees? Because I was looking at the splits earlier today, and the Rays as a team hit 16 homers against the Yankees in those 10 games was pretty good. They only hit 221, and for a team that I think also hits for contact as well, that low batting average kind of surprised me in a way because they only saw Cole, I believe, twice. So out of those 10 games, you only face Cole twice, and your batting average is still that low. It speaks to, I think, the Yankees, if you look at it, though, in their numbers, only 3 guys on the team had more than 10 hits against Tampa. That was Voit with 11. He hit 333. Urshela hit 294. And LeMahieu hit 333. So how much stock do you take into the Rays winning 8 of 10? I take a lot of it because I think the Yankees have to prove something because the Rays in that last game after that whole Chapman-Brousseau incident, I think Brousseau's a big X factor here, the way he's coming out of nowhere. But they kind of took the Yankees' soul the last time. The Yankees kind of have to go grab it back.
Yeah, I think the Yankees definitely need to come out. They need to come out swinging, and they need to come out swinging early. I think that's one thing we saw is the Yankees went pretty flat against the Rays this season. And I think they need to come out strong. I think you see Cole go, but again, it comes down to the Yankees' bats and where they're going to come into play. The Rays had our number this season. It was what it was. We were not able to put the bat on the ball. I think if the Yankees can fire up right now and stay hot throughout this ALDS, they've got a shot, but they've got to come out swinging.
One of the things I think that could also change this series, I know Mark Tompkin, who covers the Rays for the Tampa Bay Times, Austin Meadows sounds like could play in this series. And I think Meadows, what you saw at least in August and September, is a power threat and a speed threat at the top of the lineup. So now you might add him into, you already saw what Margot could do in the wild card round. You saw what Arozarena can do. You've seen they've been using Sasugo out of the leadoff spot. So their lineup is kind of interchangeable, and they're going to try to mix and match to kind of prevent the Yankees from really getting into a routine. And that's what I mean by weird with this team, is this Cash can just throw so many different lineup combinations at you. And I love the matchup in this series because each night could be a different hero. We kind of saw it in Game 1 for Tampa Bay where Margot hits the 2-run homer and is kind of the hero in that ball game in a 3-1 contest. And then in Game 2 was Renfroe at the grand slam and Mike Zunino. So those aren't household names, but at the same time, both of these teams can have different players be the hero on any given night.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing the Yankees need to be prepared for. I think that's something that Boone needs to be watching. The pitching staff needs to be watching. Is this crazy lineup that could be coming at the Yankees? I think they've got to be ready for anything. They need to do their homework. They need to watch film on all of these guys and really know what's coming. Because the Rays are going to try to keep us on our toes. They're going to try to keep us off kilter and not know what to expect and not know what's coming for them. And that's one thing the Yankees need to be ready for.
Are the Yankees the underdog in this series? Because Aaron Boone kind of gave these slight comment on Thursday that the Rays were the favorites. Do you view it? I kind of agree with him. I think even though the Yankees are the big bad Yankees, I do believe the Rays are the favorites in this series.
Yeah, I mean, I picked the Yankees to win it. I think if it goes 5, I think we still do see the Yankees win it. But yeah, I think the Yankees are absolutely the underdogs. I think they're the team that has kind of showed inconsistency this year, and one day they're hot and the next day they're silent. I think they've got to come out ready to go. We talked about it. I think the bats need to be awake. The bats need to know what's going on. They've got to perform. If they want it, they've got to come out and get it.
And that's where I think the pitching matchup for this series is going to be really interesting. Because if I'm Kevin Cash, and I've been thinking about this as well, I might throw Charlie Morton in Game 1 because I might save Snell and Glasnow for 2 and 3 because if the Rays go out and steal Game 1 from Cole, they have their 2 best pitchers against Tanaka and Happ. So I think a lot of this series could come down to how Kevin Cash wants to do the pitching matchups here because if they could somehow steal 1 from Cole and they start their number 3 in a game where you would think the Yankees are the favorite to win Game 1, it completely changes everything.
Yeah, I mean, that might not be a bad idea for the Rays to save those starters, especially knowing that they are going up against the Yankees ace in Game 1. I think you kind of maybe play that smart move. I don't think it'd be a bad move on Kevin Cash's part to save his stars for games 2 and 3, especially if those could be potential winning games for the Yankees or for the Rays.
Yeah, I always wonder if they always seem to have a step ahead of everybody, which it seems like they always are. But it also, I wonder if the Rays would handle being the favorites against Toronto, and, well, they did. They dominated. I mean, the Game 1 score was close, but they dominated Game 2 against Ryu. They took them out of the game pretty early. I was very impressed by that. But Toronto's going to be fine. They'll be back. And I think even the same with Cleveland, what we saw in this series, the Indians have so many good young arms using Quantrill, McKenzie, Karinchak, which I think that was not an indication really of what Karinchak could do in Game 2. He's filthy. The Indians are going to be fine, and Alomar did a good job for them. Let's go around the league a little bit, Alexis. So we gave our picks with John earlier, so I'll save that. What have been your thoughts on the rest of the postseason? We've seen long games. We've seen 1-0 13-inning contests. We've seen 17 pitchers used. Last night in Game 2 for the Yankees-Indians, we saw 19 walks. What have you thought about the postseason as a whole and the whole 8 games in one day that we had on Wednesday?
I think it's 2020. What more can you say right now? I thought these games have been long, man. That Yankee game about took it all out of me yesterday. The 19 walks, that was crazy. A ton of pitchers used, and I think that's these managers knowing that, especially in a 3-game series, you gotta win them all. You gotta win those 2 at the front end. These managers know that they can't mess around, that they've got to go to that bullpen early when their starters start struggling, or they're going to be in trouble. So I think that's why we see so many pitchers being used. I think these managers are just doing everything and anything in their power to try to keep games under control. But when you're the Yankees, your bullpen tends to struggle a bit. So how much can you really rely on going to that bullpen?
Yeah, if you're the White Sox and the A's and you use 17 different pitchers in a game, when you started your starters Dane Dunning and Mike Fiers only went, I think, an inning, or Dunning didn't even finish the first inning. So that was, I think, a crazy game. I only comment on the National League Series that finished. I was very impressed by the Braves. Now, I'm equally disappointed in the Reds because they scored as many runs as James and Alexis' pick on the Phillies in the postseason, 0 over 22 innings. But the Braves, Fried was excellent, and Ian Anderson, very dominant in Game 2, 6 shutout innings. The Braves bullpen's very good. Whoever they play, and they're going to have extra rest over the Marlins and the Cubs because of the rain out on Thursday. Right now, I know the Dodgers are the favorite, but Atlanta with that offense, even though it didn't really peak in this series, but they got the big home runs they needed to and the big selfies in Ozuna's case, I kind of like what Atlanta's doing right now.
Yeah, I think Atlanta looks good. I think they're a team to watch right now, for sure. Got some good games coming up this week and next week.
Very quickly on the American League side, 2 quick thoughts. Alexis, I know I have to get your thoughts. When are the Twins going to win a playoff game?
Gosh, I thought it was going to be this year, man. I really did. That game that Alex Kirilloff made his debut, I thought that was an exciting day. And congratulations to him on making that MLB debut. I thought that was it. I thought they were going to win that one. They've got work to do. I think it all comes down to their pitching. They've got to get some solid pitching, and it's got to come quick.
And I agree. And I as much as you hate the Astros, you got to give Dusty Baker a ton of credit. This is a guy who's not known for getting good managerial jobs in the postseason, where he tends to make a decision that backfires. He basically doesn't get a lot from Greinke in terms of innings, doesn't get a lot from Urquidy, and uses Framber Valdez and Christian Javier to basically shut down a powerful Twins lineup. Presley, I know, got the save in Game 2, but those 2 young kids absolutely stole the show. So for a pitching staff that's been really killed by injuries this season, I know Tampa and the Yankees have had their fair share of injuries. The Astros are right there. To sweep the Twins on the road, I thought was very impressive. And I think, honestly, Alexis, you look at this Astros-A's series, I know the Houston Astros don't have Verlander, but Oakland doesn't really have that ace in their rotation. I like Montas. I like Luzardo. We'll see if Fiers ends up getting a start, which would be interesting. There's kind of a chip right now on the Astros' shoulders, whether it's justified or not. I kind of like Houston to pull the upset against Oakland.
Yeah, I think we could see it. I think the Astros are looking good so far. I think they really made a statement in this last series that they're here and they're ready to go. I think they're going to be someone to watch. As always, the Astros are always, you can never count that team out.
Definitely. Even though, again, like I said, Carlos Correa, nobody really counted you out. They just don't like you. I mean, I think that's really what it comes down to. Like, they talk about, oh, they got this chip, we're us against the world. Yeah, it's us against the world. Because nobody wants you to win. I mean, the only reason I would even think about having it be close to wanting the Astros, not being 100% angry, is because I like Dusty Baker. I think that's a guy, if any manager deserves to win a championship from all the work he's done in baseball, it's him. That's the only thing that's stopping him from 100% hating the Astros. So that'll be interesting in the American League. National League is pretty much still going on. Cardinals-Padres has been entertaining for the most part. Milwaukee's kind of hung in there. They got too many injuries with the Dodgers. We'll see what happens there. So I'll throw a different X factor out there, by the way, since I said Richardson. It's not true. How about Diego Castillo? 0.90 ERA in 11 games this season for Tampa Bay, and he's pitched against the Yankees a lot. So throw him in there, and I'll throw Meadows on offense. So those are my two things to keep an eye on here. Alexis, any final thoughts this week? Yankees, playoffs, anything you want to throw out there?
I think, again, it's playoff baseball. We're heading into, welcome to October. Today's October 1st. Officially, we know that's the most exciting time for baseball. We've got some fun baseball coming up. Rays, Yankees. The Yankees have some work to do. It's going to be a battle for them if they want to come out on top of this series. But I think they can do it. I think that if they can come out swinging, they can keep those bats hot and they can show the fight that they showed in the series against the Indians. I think the Yankees are definitely a team to watch if they can really battle back. So yeah, it's gonna be fun.
So remember, Game 1 Monday night at Petco. Well, Monday, we don't know the time yet, but Monday on TBS, Brian Anderson and Ron Darling will have the call. Of course, we'll be back trying to do post games for as many ALDS games as possible. James and Alexis right now will be with you on Monday to recap Garrett Cole against whoever starts with Tampa Bay. My final thought, I'm going to look at modern baseball as a whole. Watching Reds-Braves in Game 1, 36 strikeouts in 13 innings. Nobody could lay down a bunt and nobody can get a big hit. And I don't normally agree with Alex Rodriguez. We need bunting back in the sport because it's ridiculous to watch all these guys strike out with first and third, nobody out. And you got to do the little things. And I think that's what made the Yankees come back or trying to hold on to leads last night or in Game 2. Successful because they came back in that ninth inning without hitting a home run. So there are ways to get it done where you don't need to hit the long ball and an extra innings. People said we need the runner on second base in the postseason. No, we don't. We need clear extra innings. But the problem is these hitters try to do too much. They try to be the hero on SportsCenter. Guess what? In the playoffs, you get a single that gives your team the lead. You get to be on SportsCenter. It's not like June 5th where you have to hit a home run to be on SportsCenter because you won an extra innings. It's the postseason. Just get a hit. Heck, pull a Gary Sanchez. Get a sacrifice fly. There should not be 36 strikeouts in a 13-inning ballgame that ends 1-0. Yes, a lot of that's the pitching. I get it. Bauer was great. Fried was great. That's fine. You get to extra innings. Somebody please get a hit. At that point, it was really frustrating, and not just because I picked the Reds to beat the Braves, but still, it was still pretty frustrating. And you saw it even White Sox A's today. 17 pitchers. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, you look at it with 5 games in 5 days, Alexis, on both leagues. Some of these teams don't even have 5 starting pitchers. You're going to have bullpen games for some of these games. And they're going to take 4 hours. And I get it. Baseball has you, the diehard fan. There's not a lot of casual fans with a lot of sports on TV. They're going to sit through 4.5 hours of baseball.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think we all saw it last night. We were supposed to record last night, and we all looked at each other and said, I'm exhausted. These are long games that I think all of us were like, man, I don't know how much longer I'm going to stay awake for this thing. Especially when there's 7 o'clock start times. Heck, if these games are going to go 4 or 5 hours, let's start starting them at like 5, 6 o'clock in the evening.
Which that'll be interesting with the West Coast start times, because especially on the days where, remember, you have the National League in Texas, in Arlington, and Houston, the AL in Petco and Dodger Stadium. I'm interested to see, especially Astros A's, because you think they're going to get the earlier time slot because the Yankees are the national team. How late do these games start? especially I think Yankees Rays, do they play that game 5 o'clock local at Petco? Do they play at 4 o'clock local at Petco? I know there's no fans, so you kind of control the time slot. There's no way the East Coast, the Yankees are starting earlier than 7, so that's where I think that's going to create. They'll get you, the Yankee fan, to watch it, but I think they've got to be really careful with these West Coast time slots.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
So I want to remind you, of course, you can follow us on Twitter at Pinstripe Pros, like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram. Please be sure to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. Tell us what you like. Tell us what you don't like. You can send me an email, rickjkeeler@gmail.com. You could subscribe to us wherever you get your podcast. Chances are you will be able to find our podcast, Pinstripe Prospects. Be sure to subscribe to our Dugout membership program. Again, $5.50 a month, $40 a year, and you get your first 30 days free using the hashtag #WelcomeBackBaseball. So our thanks to John Vittas from the play-by-play voice of Charlotte Stonecrafts joining us. Thanks to James O'Connell for hopping on early for part 1. Thanks to Alexis Farinacci for hopping on. Alexis, how can they follow you on Twitter throughout the playoffs?
You can follow me at Alexis Farinacci, just my full name. And then also give a shout out for John again. Thanks, John, for hopping on. You can follow him at John Vittas3.
You can follow me on Twitter at Rickinator555. Catch my show on Kick with Keeler every week on Full Press Radio. We'll talk a little NFL. We'll talk MLB playoffs on the show this week and NBA finals and all that fun stuff. And you can follow my work covering ESPN personalities and what they say over at Barrett Sports Media. I had a good write-up on Mike Greenberg's interview with one of my favorite broadcasters of all time, Chris Berman. So I thought that was a really fun thing to write about. So again, barring any unforeseen interviews for the ALDS, this is the last time you'll hear from us till Monday. And then right now, scheduled after Monday's game, the rest of our crew here is going to record a post-game. We'll try to do as many post-games as we can for the rest of the playoffs. We, as Alexis said, made a collective decision not to record at 1:30 a.m. on Thursday night. We wanted to decide to recap with you in a separate podcast the day after. So from all of us here at Pinstripe Prospects, I'm Ricky Keeler saying enjoy the rest of your weekend. Enjoy the playoff baseball still going on in the National League. And we'll see you back here after Game 1 on Monday.